Hello. So today we are going to be talking about how to become a digital nomad in 2022. So we are going to be talking about the different ways of being a digital nomad, what I've learned myself from being a digital nomad since 2015, some practical tips, some advice from all of that experience, as well as how to know whether or not being a digital nomad is right for you, because this life is not right for everyone. And I will be explaining why that is in this video. So if you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Una. I am a personal coach and I help high achievers by teaching them sustainable solutions for stress and anxiety so that they can achieve their dreams without compromising their health. And on this channel, I talk about stress management, anxiety management, and how to navigate life as a digital nomad in this day and age. So if you like this video, don't hesitate to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to be notified of my next video. I post new videos every week. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it. So firstly, how to become a digital nomad. What are the different ways that we can become a digital nomad? And I think something that's maybe, I guess, a positive, it's hard to say that, isn't it? Because, I know so many people have been impacted negatively by the pandemic. But one opportunity that the pandemic has opened up for us is the opportunity to work from home, the opportunity to have location independent jobs, as well as so many of us are actually questioning whether or not the life that we've been leading up until this point is really what we want to do, is something that makes sense. So what are the different ways that we can become a digital nomad in 2022? So the first way is through self-employment or freelancing. So what is freelancing? So freelancing is if you have a skill or a service that you can offer. So for example, you could be a coach like myself, or you could be something like a video editor, like the person who will be editing my video. Or you could be someone who offers some kind of service in exchange for money. So whether that is a digital service, whether that is it could also be a practical service, but then it is a little bit more difficult to do that practically, and I will explain that in a minute. So that is the first way of being a digital nomad. Now, the second way is being an entrepreneur. So what that means is you actually have your own company or you have your own job. So I'm separating freelancing and being an entrepreneur or self-employed, because for me, freelancing is more someone who's kind of employed on a freelancer basis by a company. So you might be a content creator and you work for lots of different companies, or you might be a social media manager, or maybe you're a coach that gets outsourced by other coaching companies or wellness brands and they help you. Whereas an entrepreneur, you might even have your own employees, your own freelancers. You might have a company, or like, say, for example, myself, I've got BNF, which is a digital personal development platform, something like that. So you're something that you're looking to grow, whereas freelancing, typically it's just you by yourself, right? So either of those, as well as the third way is passive income. So I'm again changing this a little bit. Passive income can be, what I'm talking about here is more like investing. So investing in like stock, shares, different types of things, could even be commodities or property, depending on what you would want to invest in. And then the last thing is a location independent job. So this is when you might be employed by someone, or even employed long-term on a freelancer basis by a company where it's literally location independent. Which means you can work from everywhere. So you don't have to stay in a certain country. It's not just working from home, you can work anywhere. So those are all the different options. Now, what I would recommend is a combination of a few, because I always recommend that you have several streams of income, just in case anything happens, like a global pandemic, for example, and you lose one stream of income. I'll talk about how to get a location independent job first. Now, I think the first thing that you need to think about is, what skills do I have that someone else might want to use? What can I offer to the world? So is there something that you know that you can offer to someone else? Or is there a way to make your current role location independent? So if you're currently employed somewhere, maybe this might be having a conversation with your manager or with your boss about, is it possible for me to make this job location independent? Now, this is not possible for all types of industries, so you'd have to make sure that you're in an industry where this is possible. So my personal experience with having a location independent job, so I've had two types of jobs. One was in hospitality, where I would actually go to different locations to work as a chef. This although it was fun to do it, it was not something that I really enjoyed, because what I found was when I was in the location, I just was always in the kitchen. So I didn't really get to experience the travel. So that's not something I would typically recommend, but if that's something that you enjoy to do and maybe you could have a different way of doing that, I think that's fabulous. But what I do now is I actually, as a coach, I basically offer my services to other coaches. So I actually work for another coach. I coach her clients, and it's a group coaching program. And I also provide support to her clients, which is wonderful because it helps me to allow to do what I love doing, which is helping people through coaching. But I don't have to have that pressure of finding clients. And also I have this guaranteed income that I get every month. Whereas before, as an entrepreneur or as a freelancer, there wasn't this kind of feeling of guaranteed income, which I think for some people it's not a problem. But for me, I just couldn't feel really comfortable with that. And some months, you'd be making a lot of money, some months no. And for me, it just wasn't really my vibe. I like to just have something consistent. So I really enjoyed having this location independent job. My job is part-time, so it allows me the freedom to work on both of my other businesses. The first thing, self-employment, freelancing, being an entrepreneur. So again, thinking about something that you're really passionate about. So for example, when I found out that I really wanted to be involved with Dianatra, I thought about, what am I really passionate about? I'm passionate about travel, I'm passionate about personal growth, and I'm passionate about helping people really lead a truly happy and fulfilling life that's aligned with their purpose and their values. And I also wanted to create something that was innovative, that was something a bit different, creating new ideas. So that's how I figured out what I was going to do, that I was going to become a coach, and also that I was going to start this company to create experiences and have a digital platform for people. So what I would encourage you to do is think for yourself, what is something that I would like to create? What is something that I would like to do? What is something that I think I could do well? And you have to make sure that it's something that you're passionate about. And this is because you are going to need to be thinking about this every single day. You are going to need to invest a lot of energy into this. You are going to need to invest a lot of time in it. So you want to make sure that it's something that you are really passionate about. Okay, finally, passive income and investing. Investing is a great way to get more out of what you're doing, because you can essentially earn money while you are sleeping, or you can earn money while you're traveling. It's also a great way to do things because you can do it while you're also doing other things. You're not tied to a desk with your laptop. However, you have to know what you're doing, because you can lose all your money this way. So it's really, really important that you know what you're doing and what you're investing in to make sure that it's something that actually grows. So I'm not going to give an advice about how to invest, because I don't feel like I'm qualified to give this advice. But what I will do is I will link some other people that I follow and who I follow their advice in the description for you to connect to do that for yourself. Now, moving on to, I know I've kind of given some ideas. So, thinking about what field you want to work in, thinking about how you could potentially make your program digital. But now, like, a lot of people ask me, actually, but, like, practically, how do you find that job that's location independent? Because, actually only 5% of jobs are truly location independent. So how do you actually find that job? Or how do you actually create that business? How do you actually make money? Right? And I think this is something I wanted to share about. So how do you actually find that job? So I think the traditional way of finding jobs, like going to a website like findajob.com or .ie or wherever you're from, it's very difficult to find a job that way. I've never personally found a job that I really like that's really good. I know some people have had some success with that, as well as going to like job centers, things like that. Again, that can work, but it can be a very long process. So what I would recommend you do first is trying to tap into your existing network. Is there anyone that I have worked with in the past who would be someone who could employ me? So is there anyone, like, maybe, for example, for me, it was my previous business coach who employed me. Is there someone who I know who might know of a job, someone who I've worked with who already knows you? Because someone who already knows you will already have built a rapport with you, they'll already trust you. Whereas if you're just applying for a job in a company that doesn't know you, you have to kind of prove yourself to them. and you're probably competing with lots of other applicants. So this is another good way of doing it. So is there anyone that you worked with in the past who could potentially know something? And then the other thing in terms of creating a job for yourself is, this is a big thing that I would really recommend, is don't start traveling until you have the job or until you have the income, unless you're just planning a trip, because what can happen then is you run out of money very quickly and you have to go home, which is fine. You know, it's fine if you have to go home, obviously, you know, it's not your fault or anything, but try to get everything set up, especially if you're starting a business. It's really hard, and I'm going to get down and talking about this a bit further on the video, but it is really hard. It's a lot of work to set up a business. And it takes a lot of energy. So you want to make sure that you're in an environment where that can happen. And sometimes if you're constantly moving around as well, that can be really challenging. So what I would recommend is set your business up, make sure that it's actually making money, because in the beginning, businesses, often you have to invest into it for a little bit until you actually get something out of it. So make sure that your business is actually making money, or that your job is actually paying you before you jump on that plane or boat or car to, you know, go off on your adventure. So that's one thing I would recommend. Now, so I wanted to move on to my second point in this video, which is what I've learned from being a digital nomad since 2015. So I've had the honor of being a digital nomad for the last 7 years. I have traveled to many beautiful places. I've seen some incredible things. I've had many ups and downs through those experiences. And also in the next year, I plan to go to some places as well. So for example, I'm planning to go to Fuerteventura in the Canary Islands, to Costa Rica, potentially to France, potentially to Norway again. So those are just the places I'm planning to, obviously, you know, dependent on the pandemic. So what have I learned from this experience? So the first thing I've learned is find a place that promotes work. Find a place that you can actually work in. So, you know, places that are just really loud, if you're on a holiday with friends, if you're on a holiday with a ton of your friends, that's probably the last place where you're going to want to work. So you want to make sure that you actually plan out dedicated time when you are going to do the work, when you're going to do that, as well as dedicated hours. So I've found through my experience that there are certain places that promote productivity and certain places that do not promote productivity. So for example, if you're staying in a youth hostel or in a hostel type environment where you need to share a room, or where it's quite loud, where people are coming in late at night, that can be a very difficult place to work in. Whereas, you know, if you're staying in an Airbnb where you have your own kitchenette, that can be a much better environment to work in. And especially making sure that the place that you're staying in has a dedicated workspace. So for me, I actually have no problem with sitting on the bed and working on the bed, but I know for some people, not having a desk can really impact their productivity. So that's something to consider as well when you're looking for a place to live. Another thing is, you know, when you're being a digital nomad, there's being a digital nomad, and then there's like, you know, just traveling around the place. So what I would recommend if you're looking to actually get work done, but also experience a place, is to plan longer stays in places. So, you know, rather than going to somewhere for 2-3 days, maybe going for a location for a month that allows you to work for a few days a week consistently, and then taking some time to actually experience a location. So I would say a minimum of 2 weeks is enough to actually stay in a place, because one thing you have to bear in mind when you're being a digital nomad is that it's not that you're just not going to work. You will have the same amount of work to do. It will just be in a different location. So you will probably have the same amount of time available than you did at home. So it's not that you're just magically going to have tons of time, unless you plan it that way, that your job is part-time. The next thing is to kind of actually prepare yourself that sometimes you are just going to be stuck in a room or in a little location working. So often, and I think I definitely got pulled into the Instagram sort of pictures of people sitting on a beach with a computer. If you do that, likely you just have to stay next to your computer, or your computer will be stolen if you go swimming, unless you're with someone else, right? So also, it's really hard to see a screen when you're sitting on a beach because of the glare of the sun, as well as you will get sand in your keyboard, which is very annoying. So although that might look very nice practically, it's not very nice, at least in my experience. So being aware that as a digital nomad, most of the time you might be stuck in a dark room working for days on end on something, and then you'll get an opportunity to go around. And that can be really frustrating. So just to be aware of that and make sure that you plan that into your schedule. So you don't expect that it's just going to be wonderful all the time. Sometimes you might miss out on really sunny days, for example, because you have Zoom calls booked in. And to be okay with that and be aware that there is a balance to be had with traveling and working. So another thing, and I think this is really, really important, is calculating your costs and making sure you are able to support this lifestyle. So I think the costs will vary hugely depending on the locations that you are traveling to and depending on your costs for yourself. If you're someone who has expensive medical bills, or maybe you're from a country where you have to have expensive medical insurance, that will cost a lot more. If you're in locations in Europe, the cost of life will be much higher than, say, if you are in Asia or in South America, for example. So that is something to consider. I would say you also want to make sure that you are factoring in the costs of actually traveling around the place. So things like your tickets, things like factoring in, sometimes when things don't go to plan, you want to factor in like the delays, things like that, as well as making sure that you have an emergency fund. And this is really, really, really important. And it's a lesson that I learned from being in the earthquake in 2015 in Nepal, is that I had planned a whole hiking trip in the Himalayas. Actually, my mom had flown out to visit me. We were planning on doing the hiking trip together. I had a flight booked home for a certain date, and then the earthquake happened. And we had to go home earlier because they were evacuating the whole country because it was a pretty big, severe earthquake. And at the time, I didn't have an emergency fund. Now, I was in a very privileged position that my mom very, very nicely gave me the money to get a new flight home. Which was eventually reimbursed by the insurance. But something to bear in mind is even if you have travel insurance, oftentimes you need to pay it first and then they reimburse you later. I would say have a minimum your trip home, and if you can have more, that would be great too, just in case something happens, you lose your job, you get sick, whatever you might need, make sure you have that. Right, so the other thing is time differences. So think about the time difference where you're going to and whether or not that can fit into place. And I think this is particularly important for people who have jobs where they need to be on Zoom calls, like myself. I'm a coach. And also when I was studying online. So things like that, because otherwise you might find yourself needing to be on a conference call at 4 a.m, which might not be the most productive time. So to bear that in mind, now I still didn't really mind this too much. So I would just sometimes be on conference calls at midnight because of the time difference, because of my studies, and it was only a couple of months. But I don't think this is something that can be sustained long term. So it can be really difficult to work at 4 a.m. long term, but if it's just once or twice because that's just the week you're in Indonesia, then okay. So that's just something to bear in mind, is the time differences and your obligations related to that. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is internet. So some places have great internet. Most of Europe has pretty good connection. If you've booked a place like an Airbnb that has internet. But something to bear in mind is just because a place has internet doesn't mean it has good internet. So even if they say, for example, I stayed in a place in Fuerteventura back in October and they said, oh yeah, we have fiber optic broadband and it's really fast. And then I got there and I literally couldn't even have a call with people. And with internet, to make sure that you actually factor in for a backup. So for example, when I was living in Nepal, they would have regular power outages. And that's also the case in some countries in South America, as well as lots of countries in Asia. You just have regular power outages. So that's just something to bear in mind, and something to factor in as well is that maybe you need to make sure that you have a SIM card that has 4G or 5G so that you have something to fall back on, as well as a way to connect to calls, to connect to your family or whoever with a phone. Now, the next thing is traveling around can be really, really exhausting, especially when things do not go to plan. I will give you an example of this. So back in November, I made a last minute trip to Norway to visit my husband's family because we haven't actually seen them in over 2 years. And on the way back, just as we were about to leave Norway, the regulations changed. So we were supposed to be transiting through the UK. And we were about to get on the plane and they said, where is your passenger locator form? And we said, well, we're actually transiting through the UK. We're not entering the UK. And they said, well, even though you're transiting through the UK, you have to fill out a passenger locator form. Otherwise, you can't get on the plane and there's no time left. So sorry, you can't get on the plane. And they wouldn't let us. And it was actually 15 other passengers on the plane, including someone in a wheelchair. So, which is terrible in my opinion. And the problem was actually the UK government website hadn't been updated. So they had changed the law, but we don't live in the UK, we don't watch UK news, so we didn't know, which is maybe a bit ignorant on our part, of course. But the point is, this is something to bear in mind, is especially in this pandemic world, regulations can change like this. You want to make sure that you stay really updated. Don't make the mistakes I did, which was assume, oh, at midnight the night before, these are the regulations, or the government website is going to have the most updated information. So always triple check things, and also factor in for, this experience was really exhausting. We actually spent the night having to sit in the arrivals in Stansted Airport, stuck with like 200 other people. We didn't sleep a wink. And thankfully, the next day I'd factored in that, I didn't have any calls booked in. But that's just something to bear in mind, is sometimes the unexpected will happen, especially if you are moving around during these pandemic times. So to make sure that you factor that in. So now, what else did I want to talk about? Oh, yes. Okay, so this is a really, really important one. It's not, I think this is just for everyone, not just digital nomads, but make sure that you have multiple bank accounts, that you have multiple cards, because not all cards work in every country. For example, they don't accept Visa cards because they think even Visa debit cards are credit cards. And that's because a lot of machines there, they have like one type of machine for just bank cards and one type of machine for MasterCards and Visas, which they have to pay extra for. So I've been to the Netherlands and then realized that none of my cards worked. And the only way was you can still often get money out of a bank, but they might charge you up to €5 or €6 to actually take out money. So that's just something to bear in mind there, to not get caught out, is some countries might not accept your card. So something I would recommend here is Revolut. So I have been using Revolut, I believe, since 2016 or 2017, whenever it came out. Since the beginning, I've been using it. And I've had nothing but good experiences for two reasons. So one reason is, one time when I was living in Nepal, my card got swallowed by the machine and they sent a new card out to me. It got to me within 3 days, which is very, very, very fast. In Nepal, like normally things take at least a month to arrive. Another reason why I recommend Revolut is because it's a great way to save money. It's a great way to have different accounts. You can actually have different accounts in different currencies, and they have I think 34 different currencies. They have really great exchange rates. Also, it's really, really easy to receive money from other people. And that's something to bear in mind as a digital nomad. So you want to make sure that you have an easy way to receive money from other people. This might be clients, but also just people who you're around with. So maybe if you're having dinner and you split the cost with someone and then they're trying to send you money. So Revolut is a really efficient way of doing that. Another thing you'd need to have as a digital nomad, if you are an entrepreneur, is a really simple payment processor or a really simple way to receive money. So I use Stripe, and I also use Revolut for that, so that I can receive money in different currencies and I can use them for that. Another thing, and this is really, really important if you are self-employed, is to make sure that you are abiding with the regulations of your country of residence. So that's the country that you are registered as a citizen of or in, right? So for example, in Ireland, I registered as a sole trader. I've always registered here. I pay my taxes here in Ireland. So you want to make sure that whatever country you're from or whatever country you're going to, that you are abiding by the laws of that country. Certain countries do not allow you to actually work in the country. So you have to make sure that, say that if you are offering a service, that it's online with someone who's not within the country, just to make sure that you're not getting caught out there, especially if you're online, because you're very easily traceable and very easy for people to reach out to you. So make sure that you are following those regulations. So finally, what I was going to talk about today is this life for you? So I told you some tips about what it's been like for me, what I've learned from it. I would say, I love being a digital nomad, even though it can be exhausting, even though things can not go to plan, things can go horribly wrong. because I just love seeing new places. I love meeting new people, connecting with different cultures, trying different food, especially. So good. Trying different foods. But I don't think this lifestyle is for everyone, because some people who like to have a base, who like to have a home, who like to have stability, I think then it might not be the best. And if you can also, and this is something that I've done as well, especially I think this is something that I've kind of had to do since the pandemic, but since the beginning of the pandemic, I have a base. I have a base here in Ireland where I spend most of my time, where I keep my stuff. And then I just go on shorter trips, which is another way of being a digital nomad, but it's not as exhausting as just, living out of a backpack, because living out of a backpack can get pretty old. It can get really, really exhausting to just not have somewhere where you can call home. So that's just something to think about is, why do I want to be a digital nomad? Why do I really crave this movement? Or, do I just want to go on a holiday? Because being a digital nomad is not the same as being on holiday. You still have to do the work. It's actually more exhausting and more time consuming than just working from home, because often there are factors that come into it that wouldn't come into it if you're working from home, for example, internet, or, just international catastrophes like earthquakes or whatever, right? So that's just something to bear in mind. So just to kind of think about, is it right for you? Again, I can't say yes or no, it really depends on you. But something to bear in mind is it's not all, just sipping cocktails or sipping, what are called, macchiatos in a cafe and just loving life. It can be really exhausting. You can get your stuff stolen, so it's for people who crave adventure. It's for people who really value travel over stability, which is something that I really value over stability. But for someone who really values stability, then just book a vacation somewhere. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. I know it's a little bit different to some of my other content. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to be notified of future videos. I hope you have a great day.